They say mercy is a gift freely given, that silence is a small price to pay for survival, that being chosen is an honor rather than a sentence. And I believed all three when they came to me in the prison cell where I had been rotting for 6 weeks. Believed when they said they could save me if I agreed to their terms. Believed when they promised that silence would protect not just me, but everyone I loved. And I agreed because what else does a girl of 19 do when faced with hanging? When her mother is begging outside the prison walls? When her younger sisters need her alive, even if that alive comes with conditions? And I thought mercy was what they were offering. Thought silence was a reasonable price. Thought being chosen meant I was special rather than expendable. And I learned the truth too late. Learned it only after the bargain was sealed and the doors were closed, and I understood that mercy can be the cruelest form of punishment. That silence can be a prison more effective than any cell. And that being chosen is not honor but targeting. Is being selected for qualities that make you useful, that make you malleable, that make you exactly what they need you to be. My name is Charity Winslow, and I was born in Salem in 1674 to a family that was neither wealthy nor poor, neither prominent nor invisible. We existed in the careful middle where most people lived. My father was a cooper who made barrels. My mother took in sewing, and we had enough, not abundance but sufficiency. And I had 2 younger sisters, Hope who was 15 and Mercy who was 12. And we were happy in the uncomplicated way that comes from not knowing how quickly happiness can be destroyed. From not understanding that being unremarkable is its own form of protection until you lose it. The accusations began in the winter of 1692, when Salem became a place where fear ate reason. When children claimed to see specters and adults believed them. When neighbor turned against neighbor and survival meant being the accuser rather than the accused. And my family tried to stay invisible, tried to simply endure until the madness passed. But invisibility is difficult when you have something others want. And what they wanted was our property, the small plot of land we owned, the house my grandfather had built, the business my father had spent 20 years establishing. And the man who wanted it was named Josiah Putnam, a distant relation to the prominent Putnam family. And he had been pressuring my father to sell for years, and my father had refused because it was our home, was our livelihood, was all we had, and Josiah was not a man who accepted refusal gracefully. The accusation came from Ann Putnam, came during meeting when she stood and pointed at me, and said my specter had tormented her, had appeared in her dreams and tried to make her sign the devil's book. And I felt the world tilt because I had done nothing, had barely spoken to Anne, had no reason she would notice me, let alone accuse me. But I understood immediately what was happening, understood that Josiah had arranged this, had used his family connections to have me accused, had found a way to destroy my family that was both legal and profitable. And I tried to speak, tried to defend myself, but no one was listening. The accusations had power that truth did not. And they took me that afternoon, dragged me from my father's shop while he shouted, and my mother wept and my sisters clung to each other in terror. The prison was worse than I could have imagined, was cold and damp and crowded with women and children. Some guilty of nothing but being inconvenient, some guilty of being old or ugly or outspoken, some guilty of having property someone else wanted. And we were all equally condemned. All equally waiting for trials that were performances rather than justice. And I spent 6 weeks in that cell watching women disappear to their trials and not return. Watching the ones who confessed be spared temporarily, while the ones who maintained innocence were sentenced immediately. And I understood that confession was survival, but I could not confess to something I had not done. Could not validate their lies even to save myself. And so I waited for my trial and tried to prepare myself for hanging. Tried to find peace with dying at 19. And I prayed not for rescue, but for my family to survive what was coming, for my sisters to be safe, for my parents to somehow keep the property that I knew Josiah would try to claim once I was gone. They came on a night when rain hammered the prison roof and thunder made the walls shake. Came as 3 figures in dark cloaks, 2 men and a woman. And they moved through the prison with an authority that made guards step aside. And they stopped at my cell, and the woman said my name, said Charity Winslow. And I answered because what else could I do? and she said they had been watching me, had seen my refusal to confess, had recognized something in me that they needed. And she said they could offer mercy, could have me released without trial, could protect my family from further accusation, could ensure that Josiah Putnam would not get his hands on our property. But there would be conditions, would be terms I had to agree to before they could proceed. And I asked what terms, what conditions, and she said first, I had to agree to absolute silence about what would happen next. Had to swear I would never speak of them, or their work, or what they asked of me. And second, I had to agree to serve them for a period of 7 years. Had to do what they asked without question or hesitation. And if I agreed, they would save me and mine. And if I refused, I would hang in 3 days and my family would lose everything. I asked who they were, and the woman said names did not matter. Said only that they served the colony in ways that could not be public. That they did necessary work that required people willing to serve in silence. And I asked what kind of work, and she said I would learn if I agreed. Said some knowledge could only be given after commitment. And I looked at her, and I saw nothing that suggested compassion or cruelty. Saw only a kind of professional assessment, as if she were evaluating livestock. And I asked if I could think about it, and she said I had until dawn, said they would return for my answer. And they left, and I was alone with the choice. And I spent that night weighing my life against 7 years of unknown service, weighing my freedom against my family's survival. And when they returned at dawn, I said yes, said I agreed to their terms, said I would serve them and keep silence. And the woman smiled and said I had chosen wisely. And she marked my answer in a book she carried. And I felt something shift, felt as though the agreement was binding in ways that went beyond simple promise. Felt as though I had signed something without reading the terms. They had me released within hours, had papers that claimed new evidence had cleared me, had documents signed by people whose names carried weight. And the magistrate who had been preparing my trial looked confused but accepted the papers. And I was free, was walking out of prison into sunlight that hurt my eyes. And my family was there, was crying and holding me. And I wanted to tell them what I had agreed to, wanted to warn them that this freedom had a price. But when I opened my mouth to speak about the 3 figures, the words would not come, literally would not form. My throat closed and my tongue felt heavy, and I understood that the silence they had demanded was not voluntary, was enforced by something I did not understand but could not fight. And I closed my mouth, and I held my family, and I said nothing because I could say nothing. The work began 3 nights later when they came to my house after my family was asleep. Came and took me without explanation to a place outside Salem, a house I had never seen, and inside were others, perhaps 20 people of various ages. And the woman who had offered me mercy said these were my fellows, people who had made similar bargains, who served in silence, who did work that kept the colony functioning in ways the public could never know. And she said I would be trained, would learn what was required, and the training began that night and continued for weeks. And what they taught me was not healing or helping but surveillance, was how to watch people without being noticed, how to listen to conversations and remember every word, how to move through Salem gathering information. And I learned that we were not servants but spies, were collecting intelligence on everyone, on who was loyal and who was not, on who had power and who wanted it, on secrets and scandals and anything that could be used as leverage. And this information went to people I never met, people whose names I was not allowed to know, people who used what we gathered to shape events, to influence trials, to determine who rose and who fell. I learned too that the witch trials themselves were being influenced by them, that some accusations were strategic, were designed to remove specific people or claim specific property, that the hysteria was genuine, but it was also being guided, being shaped to serve purposes beyond simple fear. And I was part of that machinery, was helping to destroy innocent people, was gathering information that would be used to accuse and convict. And when I tried to refuse, when I said I could not do this, could not be part of something so evil, the woman reminded me of my agreement, reminded me that I had 7 years to serve and silence to keep. And she reminded me too that my family's safety depended on my cooperation, that any resistance would end their protection, And I understood that the mercy they had promised was not rescue but recruitment, was choosing me not to save me but to use me. And I was trapped as surely as I had been in prison, perhaps more so because this trap I had walked into willingly. The worst part was not the work itself, though the work was terrible, was not the secrets I learned, though the secrets were devastating, but the slow realization of why they had chosen me specifically. Why out of all the accused women in Salem's prison they had offered me this bargain. And the truth revealed itself gradually over months of service. Revealed itself in comments made and information gathered. And I learned that my family's property was valuable not for the land itself, but for what lay beneath it, for resources that would become important, for strategic position that would matter in conflicts to come. And Josiah Putnam had known this, which was why he wanted it. And the people I served knew it too, which was why they could not let him have it. And they needed my family to keep the property, but they needed someone in my family who could be controlled, who could be leveraged, who would do what they were told because they had no choice. And that someone was me. I was the mechanism of control, the insurance that my family's property would serve their purposes rather than Josiah's. And I had been chosen not for any quality I possessed, but for my strategic value, for my usefulness as a tool. And this knowledge was almost worse than the work itself, was understanding that even my rescue had been calculation. 7 years is a long time when every day is filled with work that destroys your soul. When you cannot speak about what you do or why. When you watch your family celebrate your freedom while knowing that freedom is an illusion. When you gather information that will be used to hurt people, and you cannot warn them, cannot stop it, can only watch and remember and carry the weight of complicity. And I served my 7 years because I had no choice. Because breaking the agreement meant my family would suffer, meant everything I had endured would be for nothing. And when the 7 years finally ended, when the woman came to me and said my service was complete, said I was free to return to my life, said my silence would remain enforced but my service was done, I thought I would feel relief, thought freedom from service would feel like victory. But what I felt was hollowness, was the understanding that 7 years of doing terrible things had changed me, had made me into someone my younger self would not recognize. And I could not speak about what I had done, which meant I could not seek forgiveness or understanding or even simple acknowledgement. And I was free, but I was also alone in a way that felt permanent. My family never knew, never understood why I was different after prison, why I was quiet and distant, why I flinched at certain names or avoided certain people, why I never married though I had suitors, why I spent so much time alone, and I could not tell them, could not explain, could not break the silence that had been built into my very throat. And this silence became my second prison, became the bars I carried with me even after service ended. And I understood that they had been right about one thing, that silence was effective, was more reliable than walls or chains. Because silence meant carrying your imprisonment inside yourself, meant being your own jailer, and there was no escape from that. I am older now, much older. My parents are gone and my sisters are married with children of their own. And I still keep the property, still maintain it as I was meant to. And I still cannot speak about those 7 years. Still feel my throat close when I try to tell the truth. And I have come to understand that mercy is what they called it, but slavery is what it was. That being chosen is not honor but curse. That promises made by people with power are chains disguised as gifts. And I carry this knowledge alone because I must. Because silence is still enforced even now, decades later, even though the people I served are likely dead. The magic or contract or whatever bound me remains, and perhaps it will remain until I die. Perhaps this is a burden I will carry to my grave, and perhaps that too is part of their mercy, ensuring that their secrets die with those who keep them. This is my confession, and I do not know if these words will reach anyone. Do not know if the silence will allow even this careful speaking around the edges of truth. This testimony that names no names and reveals no specifics, but acknowledges that something terrible happened, that mercy can be cruelty, that silence can be prison, that being chosen can be the worst fate of all. And if you are reading this, if these words somehow survive the magic that tries to suppress them, then know that there are systems within systems, That the trials you know about were only part of what happened. That some of us were saved not from death but for purposes worse than death. And that 7 years of service is 7 years of slowly dying while still breathing. Is being alive but not living. Is surviving when you should have been allowed to die with your integrity intact. And perhaps that is the cruelest mercy of all. Forcing someone to survive when survival requires becoming something they despise. Forcing them to live with what they have done while denying them the relief of speaking it. And I have lived with it for 40 years, have carried it alone for 40 years. And I will carry it until I cannot anymore. And perhaps this confession is my final rebellion. My last attempt to break the silence, even if only partially. Even if only